This talk today is about free will. Yesterday I was thinking about it. Is something I've thought about many times, but for some reason, something struck me when I read it yesterday. Ramana Maharshi kind of just was very dismissive of the idea of free will. And we hear things sometimes for most of our lives, and doesn't really register. And of course, I've read most of the debates on free will, and I really never thought much about it. I certainly wasn't ever dismissive of it, of the idea. And I should have been. And Ramana Maharshi, in something I read the other day in passing, said, there's no free will. To talk about it is ridiculous. And it struck me right there how silly the debate is. And it's been going on for centuries, of course. And the idea of it is ridiculous because, of course, we're all controlled by our desires. And I've known this all along, of course, so most of you have too. It's no secret, all of the religious teachers teach that desire is not your friend. But it struck me yesterday really strongly that the idea of free will is absurd as long as desire is present, because of course we're controlled by our desires. And desire is really a shell game. By a shell game, I mean you renounce, let's say, eating dairy, but then you eat, the desire for dairy if you like cheese or something, for example. Well, it just goes to something else, like really delicious artificial meat or something like that, or some crazy tofu fish, which I've had that's identical to fish. So it just goes to another craving. So whatever we're craving, like if we think sometimes we forget that it's desire and craving, especially craving and hankerings. Desire is one thing, but then when we embellish it with craving and hankerings, it's another. Of course, we have to desire, a certain amount to survive. We have to desire nutrition. And if we want to have children, we have to desire sex. And if we want to quench our thirst, our body tells us we desire water. We desire water. What we really desire is water. What we crave and hanker for is, chocolate milk, like I was craving last night. But I settled for Tibetan tea made with salt and butter. So desire is one thing, crave and hankering is another. And when the Buddha talks about cutting off the 5 desires, well, you got to start somewhere. And you start with craving and hankerings, of course. But it's not always so obvious when you're in the thick of it. So like typically we like I say, we stop one thing, we we think that we crave too much of one thing, but then if we examine it, it just appears somewhere else. That's why it's kind of a shell game. Well, where is it going to appear next? You have three shells, and under one is cake, and in the other is unleavened bread, like the Jewish people like to eat. It's funny, it was originally an ascetic practice, but now, people really like those unleavened crackers. And under the other, you maybe have some chapati. So of course, cake is a craving and hankering, and it's the least good for you. And the matzah and chapatis are really good for you, but maybe you don't really crave them. Maybe you do. So the idea is to approach desire, cutting off desire through cutting off craving and hankerings first. And then, once you, through logic and reasoning, analyze and realize, well, these things I crave and these things I hanker for, but this thing will do the same job, and I don't crave it or I don't hanker after it. I just desire to fill my belly. That's what my body is telling me, and to get the most bang for my buck by eating something really nutritious. So if we do that, then we're taking a step to really having free will. And the reason the debate is so ridiculous, it's just that as long as there's desire there, the free will we have is within desire. So it's like a person in prison that can move around in the prison, but he cannot go outside the prison. So the debate about free will is really something to be very dismissive about. It's an absurd debate, but it's because it's really debated about, amongst people that really are controlled by their desires. So they can be in their prison and think that moving around in the prison is free will. Or they might think it's not free will. They might think, going outside would be free will. But they'd still be in their prison of desire. So the whole debate doesn't make any sense, because it's all taking place within, 5 desires. But if we want to get out of the prison of the 5 desires, we do have free will to do so. And it starts with cravings and hankerings. It doesn't start with, just cutting off desire, fasting, or going on all so-and-so diet, or not being a celibate or anything like that, because it's a shell. It pops up anywhere. You force yourself into celibacy and you turn into a really angry person, or worse yet, a really perverted person. So one has to be skillful about it. if one wants to cut up, has a lot of greed for food, like me, then you can well, okay, you want to eat a lot of food and you love all of these delicious foods. Well, you do need nutrition. So what I do is I just put everything in one bowl and just mix it all together. And I try not to eat anything processed. And I settle my desire for food and nutrition, but there's really no craving and hankering generally. So it's a middle way. It's not 100%. And a person that has a lot of lust and sexual desire and craves sex and hankers after sex, well, rather than becoming celibate, the smart thing to do would be to find a middle way and say, well, if this is the way it is, I'll find myself a mate and stay with her and discipline myself in it. I remember one very sagely person said that a person that lives a true married life, is a celibate, same as a celibate. And he might be better off because he's less likely to have, crazy views for, endless views for sex. The Dalai Lama said, which is said that he had a mosquito bite on his neck. So his doctor says, well, don't itch it. And of course, the mosquito bite was too tempting for the Dalai Lama, so he itched it. And then the more he itched it, the more he wanted to itch it. And pretty soon it got infected. He said he had to go back to the doctor. And so it's kind of like that with sex. It never ends if you open that door. But you can close that door by having a good relationship with a member of the opposite sex and really stay with it. So that's better than celibacy that's not working. If celibacy really works, it's great. And I myself have been on both sides of that. And when it works, it's fantastic. And it only works well if you can enter deep meditative states where the joy of meditation is so fantastic that sex really doesn't compare. You're your own soulmate, and it's really true. There's no soulmate like yourself. If you can find yourself, you found your true soulmate, and you never need anything else. And that's just the way it is. But if you haven't a really good relationship with a member of the opposite sex, based on understanding and love, is the best door to really knowing yourself. It beats celibacy that has discontent anytime. So, free will is something that we should all really think about. We should think about it in terms of how impossible and how really silly the debate is, when all of those people debating it are really, debating it within the realm of desire. And so, of course, somebody that has no desire, that person really has free will. And in fact, he doesn't have any will at all. He just unites with and is in harmony with nature and all living beings. So you have somebody that has cut off desire completely. They may have a mate, they may eat good food, but they don't crave it. They don't have any desire for it one way or the other. It just comes, whatever comes their way by chance, as the Chan masters say, just take that and don't seek anything. Non-seeking and contentment. Contentment with whatever is offered to you, whatever Mother Nature offers to you, whatever your way of life offers to you, without seeking anything, being content. For a person that has no craving and hankerings, no desires, who's really cut off desire, it's not a question of free will. It's a question of being content no matter what. And you have an example of someone like Milarepa. He lived in a cave in the remote Himalayas, 18,000 feet, living with one layer of cotton and, eating nettles for food and drinking the melted snow, drinking. He was content. But that's just Milarepa's way. Another great master might have a beautiful monastery and be offered all sorts of delicacies. And a great realization like Milarepa might have like a nice car and everything, but it's a byproduct of his life, and he just accepts it and he's content with it. He doesn't look on it as something that he craves or hankers for. He's indifferent to it. So if we can be indifferent to and what we have and what comes our way, and accept that helps a lot towards realizing free will. It goes a long, long way. So whatever we really have our eye on, have set our mind on, whatever it might be, cars, clothes, a house, whatever we might want, well, be at peace with that and say, okay, I haven't cut off desire and craving and hankerings, and I want this thing, but let me get it, but let it be a middle way thing, not the best of that, not what I really have my eye on, and not the worst of that, but something that will do the job. Middle way. So in respect to desire and free will, if we really want free will, it has to be a non sequitur, if I pronounce that right. It has to be something that we really don't care about, like whether there's free will or no free will. We have to transcend desire, then there's no question about free will or whether there's free will or not. It's a ridiculous question. It doesn't seem ridiculous, but as long as we're in the desire realm, it's ridiculous. Once we escape the desire realm, then it's really ridiculous, because where there's nothing to will, or nothing to crave, or nothing to hanker for, because you just accept what comes your way as a byproduct of your life, how you've lived your life. For Milarepa, it was a a cave in the mountains with very little, and he was extremely joyful. For someone else, it might be a wife and children and a beautiful home, cars and everything else, but he treats it all with indifference. But how do you treat something like that with indifference when you have abundance? It's when the abundance is a byproduct of your realization and your life. So a person that's very realized and knows the nature of his mind, all extremely fantastic things and foods and everything will be something that he's indifferent towards, because his realization is so great that it outshines everything that's possible materially. So any comfort or any sensation or any food or anything, material object, form, is something that's very small in the light of his realization. So he can look at all of the world around him if he does have abundance, like Milarepa looks at his cave and his surroundings, with appreciation for what they are, but knowing that, in the light of the mind, it's all something that exists as it is, and it's nothing to struggle for or reject or want something other than living in realization. So that's the way to, at least what struck me was about and moved me to give this talk was when I read the other day about free will and how it is kind of bizarre that there's a debate about it at all, because we're all functioning within desire, and there's no escaping that without finding a middle way in desire. And that middle way is avoiding cravings and hankerings without going the other way and blocking them altogether, because that just leads to it appearing somewhere else. And you don't have to go very far to see evidence of that. People become vegetarians and vegans. If you go into any health food store and you see all the processed foods that vegans have come up with, and vegetarians too, all the concoctions, it's astounding. It's more so than the meat eaters and the people that haven't even gone on diet trips. I mean, the ingenuity and the cravings, what it led to, is unbelievable. I mean, you talk about Whole Foods. Whole Foods is basically single foods like people ate once upon a time. And I eat mostly that now. But you go into a Whole Foods supermarket and you look at all the foods that are processed. All of the processed foods are the results of craving and hankerings of people that have disciplined themselves to follow this diet or that diet and found ways to satisfy whatever that aspiration, that discipline led to. So they block one thing out and they create 10 things to fulfill that craving and desire for that thing that is blocked out now. And you block sex and you become either a repressed, crazy, angry person, or you become perverted in some other way. So blocking never works, but middle way works. You have a lot of sexual desire and you get married and you stay with, you say, well, I'm not going to become a celibate, but at least I can become a good father and a good husband or a good wife, a good mother. That's what's important in finding the middle way. And so that's the art. That's the art of life, is finding that sweet spot where you're not blocking anything out entirely, and you're working with your desires in order to unravel them and find that light in the mind that obliterates desire and makes it seem ridiculous to even think about satisfying one's self through following, desire. It becomes absurd. So when that happens, then everything is okay, and there's no question of free will because there's no thing to will. You accept what Mother Nature brings, what life brings, and you work within that parameter. And that's really, then there's no such thing as anything to will. You are in harmony, and that's where it's at. And I don't know if this makes any sense. It's just what I just decided to talk this morning about, it struck me a little differently when I heard or read a little quote. I was cruising on Facebook, seeing what my friends were saying. It was a little quote by Ramana Maharshi, who just said, the whole debate on free will is just pointless debate, because there's nothing to will if you're really in harmony with the planet and yourself.